You know, if you take credit for what the stock market is doing when the things are going up, that's like a boomerang. That's going to come back, and when the stock market goes down, you're going to be stuck with the responsibility which you yourself insisted on when it was going up. Let's review very briefly. One of the key reasons why the stock market has gone up is precisely because this government has pumped an enormous amount of money into the economy to try to prevent it from dissolving after 2008 and 9, but it has been unable to get going again a vibrant, a growing economy. So where's the money going to go to? It isn't going into forming what we call capital, building businesses, creating new wealth. It isn't doing that. It's rushing to where money goes when it can't find the productive outlet, and that is to loans to one another. It is to bidding up the prices of stocks. It is to companies buying back their stocks to drive up the price, because that's what executives' bonuses are tied to. We have a kind of strange swirling around of money from cash to securities to bonds to cash. This is not a good idea. This is being looked at with great trepidation by many of the biggest leaders of finance in the United States. Jamie Dimon today worrying about it. Many others. This is a very dangerous time. You know, the history of capitalism is it's a very unstable system. Every 4 to 7 years, it has an economic downturn on the average. Now, it's just an average, so you don't have it each time. Well, we've been now without a downturn since the crash of 2008 and 2009. Do the math. We're due for the next one, and everybody who knows what Wall Street is like sees it. It is extraordinarily short-sighted for the president to claim credit, which, by the way, he doesn't deserve. A million things shape the stock market. But it is dangerous for him because when that downturn comes, and it's highly likely before his first term is over, he will get the blame. And given his precarious situation in our culture, blame for an economic downturn is the last thing he would want.
Is this recovery so fragile? Is it so held together with bubble gum and baling wire that you know, talk of war, not necessarily war itself, but these kinds of importunate or importune comments could be the thing that could trigger a recession or burst a bubble?
Absolutely. Let me give you the best example of how shaky this recovery is. We were supposed to have, over the last 2 years at least, rising interest rates to try to hold down the explosive potential of all that extra money we pumped into the economy to save it from crashing. So we were supposed to raise interest rates a lot. We haven't done that. We have barely raised them at all. And the reason for that is very simple. This fragile recovery is so fragile that if you up the interest rates, which make it more expensive to buy a home, which make it more expensive to buy a car, which make it more expensive for companies to borrow to invest, the fear of Janet Yellen and her colleagues at the Federal Reserve is that this fragile recovery will dissolve. That said, a threat of war, or indeed any political upheaval, is easily able, on top of all that fragility, to take us over the edge. And when you add that we're due for a downturn, because we've had the 4 to 7 years of survival, if you like, well, then you have a very dangerous cocktail that could be exploded by almost anything.
What's the relationship between war and the threats of war and an economy?
It's an old story. It's a very dangerous game. It has a little bit to do with the temptation for leaders for many, many generations. When they've backed themselves into a corner, when they've made promises they're finding it impossible to keep, to solve their economic and political problems by a war. Sometimes there are other reasons, of course, for the war, but the political and the economic are always in the mix. And so I suspect that Mr. Trump, facing his failures to get the health reform, as he called it, through, having taken way too long to get almost anything done, is trying to figure out what to do and which way to turn. And there are always people who are telling him that war is what he ought to do, that war will magically solve the problem. And so the temptation is there. And when you have a president like this, you have to worry, of course, that temptations will become decisions from which there is no turning back. I will tell you that in the case of North Korea and in many other cases, Mr. Trump will go it alone. He may manufacture a coalition of the willing, but it's PR, it's not real. The rest of the world, including most of our allies, if not all of them, don't want this, are afraid of this, see this as yet another military, endless conflict with no resolution, like Afghanistan has been, like Iraq has been, like much of the rest of the Middle East looks like it's becoming. These are very dangerous decisions that we have put in the hands of a person who screams at us every day that he's not the right one to make such a decision.